Greetings, YouTube. Today I'll be discussing Grave Secrets of the Dinosaurs, Soft Tissues and Hard Science by Philip Manning. And there's kind of a cool, here's a hadrosaur hindquarters and a hadrosaur front quarters on this particular cover. I thought it was interesting that they decided to concentrate on this portion of the dinosaur because that's the portion of the dinosaur that they actually discovered. And this is built around one particular dinosaur, but it discusses paleontology and the research that goes into paleontology and how they get dinosaurs out of the ground and how they do research on finds and what the ramifications are thereof, and et cetera, et cetera. So while it does discuss a particular dinosaur, which came to be known as Dakota because it was found in one of the Dakotas in the Badlands, this does cover dinosaurs from a large section of our history and the history of our discovery of fossils and how those discoveries have affected our views of science and biology and things like that. The author is a pretty decent writer, and he gets occasionally he gets a little overuse of the explanation points. I think that occasionally his personal enthusiasm shines through in a way that kind of punches holes through his otherwise professional style of writing. It's kind of weird. It's like he's doing this very well written description of what's going on, and once in a while it's like boop, boop, and there's like these little exclamation points pop up because you can tell that he's personally interested in that particular segment of the book. It had a kind of an amateur flair to it, which made me smile. But apparently he's been writing for quite a while, so maybe it's just like how he likes it to flavor his writing. I'm not sure. But he also gives a brief biography of himself, and in the process of bringing a biography of his own history with paleontology, he talks about, again, he's using that as a metaphor for the history of the paleontology up to the present kind of thing. I found the aspects in here that dealt with a lot of the technical things personally very interesting. I can imagine how some people might find it a bit on the dry side. Because I don't mind reading about things that talk about like doing CT scanning and all the different requirements and the fact that you needed to use a 9 megavolt emitter as opposed to a 6 megavolt emitter to get higher radiation levels so you can penetrate more precisely through a fossil concretion that is of greater density than you have encountered in the past. That kind of thing is things that I enjoy, but I can imagine that some people are probably going to get a little glaze on their eyes in that section, like, oh wow, this is really technical stuff. But I didn't mind it. And there is a section here of pictures, black and white pictures of the find, and they actually do give off, they do give one specimen of actual soft tissue fossilization which has been discovered. This was a T-Rex infant. I believe it might have been still in an egg when it was found. But for me, what was very frustrating with this book was that there are no pictures of the dinosaur soft tissue evidence of the dinosaur they found. So they don't have any of Dakota's skin pictures in here. And that's what the whole thing is, because Dakota was quite possibly one of the best, at least to date, fossilized mummy dinosaurs ever. And mummy in the sense is that you have evidence of soft body materials as well as the bones. So it wasn't mummified. There's no actual dinosaur bits left inside this thing as a conventional human or animal mummy within the last, 10 or 20,000 years, but things that give an impression that you get evidence of the body in whole. And one of the things they found is they actually found tail section. So you actually there's the bone, and then there's the envelope of the skin around that. So it wasn't crushed. So it was fossilized as a whole structure, which is incredibly, unbelievably rare. So it gave ideas not only of what this looked like as a cross-section in life, which is rare, but you gave you mass concepts. You said, okay, we now know that this cross-section of this tail had X amount of muscle to X amount of bone and X amount of, and you know what I mean? So you can do calculations for figuring out density and body muscle to bone ratios, things like that, in a way that you can't do under most circumstances. But there are no pictures of those skin. And I didn't really understand why until I got to the end. There's a little blurb here in the back page, literally in the back page of the book. Look for the this amazing story on the small screen in Dino Autopsy on the National Geographic Channel. And there is why you didn't have the information about this particular dinosaur, because they're doing, or did, because this has been out for a while, did a documentary for the National Geographic Channel. And they didn't want to spoil it. Also, this was written while they were still doing some of the research. I think we would have been better off if the author of this book had waited a year. So some of the research that they were still in process, in literally processing, in the same case of some computer data of the CT scans they had done, were still being done because there's so much data. It takes so long to process all this information that it's not an instantaneous thing. It can take weeks and weeks and weeks to process a single scan on one of these things, and you have to do this multiple times before you get the data you need. But it's like they rushed this to press, to my mind, before the documentary was done so that you'd have a companion piece. And I think we would have been better off if this had been a more complete book than if they had waited another year or so. It's about a dinosaur, folks. If we'd waited 12 to 24 months, it wouldn't have made any difference to the dinosaur fossil. It's still going to be there. It's been there for millions of years. It's going to be there for another 2. So it's a good book, but it has the sense of not being complete. I didn't feel it was a nice wrap-up because of this. I feel kind of cheated because there's this blurb in the back saying, go watch the documentary, which I think was kind of on the sleazy side. Having said that, all the information about the history of dinosaurs and paleontology in particular, how we research them, how we dig them up, how we process them, what it can tell us, all the information about locomotion in the last chapter or so, which dealt with locomotion, how we predict and how we come up with computer models for locomotion, was fascinating to me. So I definitely enjoyed the book. I just think I enjoyed the book almost incidentally to what the author was talking about, because I don't think the author wrapped up his topic well. It was the incidental material that he was talking about other than his main full focus that I found fascinating, I think was well worth reading, but I feel kind of cheated that he didn't wrap up the main focus of the book well. I haven't seen the documentary. I may very well never see the documentary, so I'm feeling kind of left out on this. So I may dig up a copy somewhere and see if I can take a look at it and see if it's any good or not. As kind of a follow-up to this. I have to look that up, look up Dino Autopsy. There is one interesting thing that I thought was very fascinating, and they actually had 5 labs corroborate this. So this is not just pie-in-the-sky stuff. They actually found organic materials left in this fossil. Actual dinosaur organic materials. Not DNA. DNA is water-soluble. But there was some of the leftovers of the cycle of life in the form of certain types of amino acids. Real amino acids left over from a dinosaur. That's cool. Now, I'm not really sure what you can do with that, but just the fact that we found the evidence that it's there is fascinating. He also talks about another fossil which they found, which is a very small dinosaur, like turkey size. And there was one fossil, I believe it was found in Italy, and it was in a place where they had found lots and lots of fish, but they hadn't found any dinosaur fossils. And they found this fossil, and it had actual muscle impressions found in its chest cavities. Chest cavity, I should say. And it actually had the impressions of the intestinal tract. Actually, the shape of the intestinal tract was left behind in this fossil. Interestingly, they discovered that the intestinal tract in this dinosaur was higher up, whereas ours is definitely below our stomachs and everything. And these things were higher up. And they actually hadn't known that the intestinal tract was kept higher, because 99.999% of the time when you find a dinosaur fossil, you don't have any clue where the internal organs are in relationship to everything else. But this one particular fossil left them that kind of detail. That's incredible. So yes, there were things in this book that were definitely worth a read, in my opinion. I just wish that the topic of the book itself, the Dakota fossil, had been covered better.